The rain lashed against the windows of the high-rise apartment, blurring the city lights into smears of neon. Inside, the atmosphere was just as heavy, though far more silent. Rin sat on the edge of the velvet sofa, his fingers tracing the rim of a lukewarm coffee mug. Across from him sat his brother-in-law, Liam. They were alone. Rin's wife, Sarah, was away on a business trip, leaving the two men in a space that suddenly felt far too small for both of them. Ever since Rin had married into the family, Liam had been a constant, quiet shadow. It wasn't the typical hostility of a protective younger brother. It was something more surgical. Liam didn't want to break their marriage. He wanted to occupy every spare inch of Ren's periphery. "You look tired, Rin," Liam said, his voice smooth and devoid of its usual sharp edge. He didn't move from his chair, but his gaze was anchored on Ren's face, tracing the exhaustion under his eyes. "Just work," Ren replied, trying to offer a polite smile. "And missing Sarah, I suppose." At the mention of his sister's name, Liam's eyes darkened almost imperceptibly. He stood up, his movements fluid and deliberate, and walked toward the kitchen. "She always did demand too much of people's time. Even when we were kids, she never knew when to let someone breathe." Liam returned not with coffee, but with a glass of water and a small tray of fruit he'd sliced with terrifying precision. He set it down, but instead of returning to his chair, he sat on the coffee table directly in front of Rin, invading his personal space. "You're too good at being a husband," Liam murmured. He reached out, his hand hovering near Ren's shoulder before finally settling there. The grip wasn't aggressive, but it was firm, a tether. "You spend all your energy making her life perfect. Who makes yours perfect while she's gone?" Rin felt a prickle of unease. "Liam, it's fine. I'm an adult. You're a treasure she doesn't know how to guard," Liam countered. His hand slid from Ren's shoulder to the nape of his neck, his thumb brushing against the hairline. It was a gesture of deep, suffocating intimacy. "I watched her take everything from you for 3 years. Your weekends, your hobbies, your focus. If you were mine, I wouldn't let the world drain you like this." The air in the room felt thick, charged with a tension that had been building since the day they met. Rin looked up, meeting Liam's intense, proprietary stare. There was a desperate kind of hunger there, a need not just to be near Rin, but to be the only thing Rin saw. "She's your sister," Rin reminded him, his voice barely a whisper. "And you're the only person who has ever looked at me and seen something worth keeping," Liam replied, his face inching closer. "She has the ring, Ron. She has the legal documents. But I'm the one here in the dark with you. I'm the one who knows how you take your tea when you're stressed. I'm the one who knows you hate the silence of this apartment." Liam leaned in, his forehead resting against Ren's. It was a claim, silent and heavy. He wasn't trying to replace Sarah. He was trying to carve out a world where only he and Rin existed, a secret bond forged in the shadows of a family dynamic that was rapidly unraveling. "Let her have the title," Liam whispered against the skin of Ren's cheek. "Just let me have the rest." The air in the drawing room grew stagnant, heavy with the scent of rain-dampened wool and the faint, clinical aroma of Liam's cologne. Rin felt an acute sense of vertigo, as if the floor had tilted, leaving him suspended in the gravitational pull of Liam's unwavering focus. The architect of devotion. Liam's hand remained anchored at the nape of Ren's neck, his fingers tracing the delicate vertebrae with a rhythmic, almost hypnotic deliberation. "You are an exquisite study in self-sacrifice, Rin," Liam murmured, his voice a low timbre that resonated in the hollow of Ren's chest. "Sarah views your devotion as an atmospheric constant, something as ubiquitous and uncelebrated as the air she breathes. But I see the meticulous labor of your affection." Rin attempted to recoil, but the movement was sluggish, hampered by a burgeoning, inexplicable lethargy. "Liam, this rhetoric is perilous. You're weaving a narrative that doesn't exist." "Perilous?" Liam echoed, a glacial smile ghosting across his lips. "Perhaps, but isn't there a certain sublime clarity in the truth? She possesses the social contract, the performative rituals of matrimony. Yet, she is oblivious to the nuances of your exhaustion. She traverses the globe while you remain here, a gilded bird in a cage of your own construction. The encroaching shadow. Liam leaned closer, the proximity now an oppressive weight. His gaze was predatory, yet profoundly lonely, a complex tapestry of adoration and avarice. I have spent years observing the erosion of your spirit under her benign neglect. Every compromise you make for her is a laceration I feel on my own skin. My possessiveness isn't a shadow. Run, it is a sanctuary. He reached out with his free hand, his thumb tracing the contour of Ren's lower lip with a pressure that bordered on bruising. I want to excise the world that demands so much of you. I want to be the sole recipient of your gaze, the singular architect of your comfort. If I could, I would shroud you in a silence so profound that only my voice could reach you. A fragile equilibrium. The clock on the mantel chimed, a lonely, metallic sound that underscored the isolation of the penthouse. Ren found himself trapped between the moral imperative of his vows and the intoxicating, claustrophobic intensity of Liam's fixation. It was a bond forged in the crucible of shared history and unspoken desires, a connection that felt less like a friendship and more like a slow, deliberate colonization. You speak as if I am an object to be curated, Ren whispered, his breath hitching as Liam's forehead pressed once more against his own. Not an object, Liam corrected, his eyes burning with a fervid, unyielding light. A masterpiece. And a masterpiece deserves a guardian who understands its true worth. Let her have the sunlight. Run. Give me the shadows. Give me the parts of you that you hide, even from yourself. The interior of Liam's mind was a labyrinthine gallery where every corridor led back to a single, illuminated portrait. Ren. To Liam, his sister's husband was not a relative by law, but a profound architectural flaw in his own stoic composure. The anatomy of obsession. Liam sat in the opulent silence of his private study, the amber liquid in his crystal tumbler catching the dying light. He didn't just desire Ron, he curated him. He possessed a mental ledger of Ren's most infinitesimal gestures, the way his pulse thrummed against his throat when he was agitated, or the specific, melancholic shade of his eyes when he stared too long at the horizon. She is a tenant in a palace she does not deserve, Liam thought, his grip tightening on the glass. To him, Sarah's affection was a pedestrian thing, loud, demanding, and utterly superficial. She viewed Run as a companion, a steadying force for her own ambitions. Liam, however, viewed Run as a sacred relic, one that required a shroud of absolute, suffocating protection. The avarice of the soul. His possessiveness was not a sudden squall, but a glacial encroachment. He found a dark, visceral satisfaction in the moments Sarah was absent. Each mile she traveled away from the city was a tether he could wind tighter around Ren's spirit. He took a perverse pleasure in the expensive nature of his devotion. He didn't offer common comforts, but a total, unwavering absorption of Ren's identity. He recalled the sensation of his thumb against Ren's lip, a momentary breach of the social contract that felt more like a reclamation than a transgression. I'm the only one who perceives the fracture in his soul, Liam mused, his thoughts spiraling into a feverish intensity. I'm the only one willing to burn the world down just to keep him warm in the embers. The sovereign claim. Liam didn't seek a conventional romance. He sought a monopoly. He wanted to be the atmosphere of pressure that kept Ren whole. He envisioned a life where Ren's every necessity was filtered through his own hands, where Sarah's name became a fading echo in a room filled only with the resonance of Liam's voice. It was a sovereign claim, a silent declaration of war against the mundane reality of Ren's marriage. In the sanctuary of his own mind, Liam had already dismantled the union. He was merely waiting for the physical world to catch up to the inevitable reality that Ren belonged to the shadows he had so carefully cultivated. The return of Sarah was not a homecoming. It was an intrusion. The click of her heels on the polished hardwood sounded like a gavel, pronouncing a verdict on the feverish, suspended reality Run and Liam had occupied. The shattered lens. Rin stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, the city lights reflecting in his eyes like distant, cold diamonds. He felt Liam's presence behind him. Not a physical touch, but a thermal weight, a psychic anchor. When Sarah crossed the threshold, her voice full of mundane anecdotes about flight delays and boardrooms, the dissonance was violent. Liam didn't move. He remained in the shadows of the kitchenette, his silhouette a sharp, jagged edge against the warmth of the living room. His gaze wasn't on his sister. It was fixed on the nape of Ren's neck, a silent, predatory vigil that Sarah, in her exhaustion, failed to perceive. The silent relinquishment. "You both look like you've seen a ghost," Sarah laughed, dropping her designer bags with a thud that felt like a burial. She moved to embrace Ren, her touch familiar and light. In that moment, Ren felt the devastating gravity of Liam's sanctuary. Sarah's love was a gentle sun, easy, distracted, and diffused. Liam's love was a black hole, absolute, crushing, and singular. As Sarah pulled away to recount her trip, Ren's eyes met Liam's across the expanse of the room. There was no malice in Liam's expression, only a profound, crystalline despair. It was the look of a man who had built a cathedral in the dark, only to have the doors flung open by a careless hand. His possessiveness wasn't just a desire to own. It was a desperate, scorched-earth policy to protect the only version of Ren that truly existed, the one that only Liam saw. The emotional horizon. "I should go," Liam said, his voice a brittle rasp that cut through Sarah's chatter. He walked toward the door, but as he passed Ren, his hand brushed against Ren's sleeve, a fleeting, infinitesimal contact that carried the weight of a lifetime of unspoken devotion. It was a surrender and a promise all at once. Ren watched him leave, the heavy oak door clicking shut with a finality that felt like a bereavement. Sarah was talking again, something about dinner or the weather, but her voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Ren realized then that the safe world Sarah offered was now a desolate landscape. Liam hadn't just observed the fractures in Ren's soul. He had moved into them. The tragedy wasn't that Liam was a monster of possessiveness. It was that he had made Ren feel more seen in the shadows than he had ever felt in the light. Standing in the center of his perfect home, wrapped in the arms of his perfect wife, Ren felt an ache of exquisite, incurable loneliness. He was a masterpiece whose guardian had just walked out into the rain, leaving him to be admired by someone who didn't know how to see the brushstrokes. The silence that followed Liam's departure was not a void. It was a physical presence, a dense, atmospheric weight that settled into the corners of the penthouse. Sarah's voice, once a comforting melody of domesticity, now sounded like a transmission from a distant, flickering star, perceptible, but no longer relevant to the gravity of the room. The paper relic. Weeks later, while Sarah was at a gallery opening, Ren found it. It was tucked inside the silk lining of a winter coat he hadn't worn since the night the rain turned to ice. It wasn't a letter in the traditional sense. It was a single sheet of heavy, vellum paper, unaddressed and unsigned, yet saturated with Liam's precise, predatory calligraphy. "You are a masterpiece being viewed in the wrong light. She sees the canvas, I see the weave. She sees the color, I see the blood used to grind the pigment. To love you is to witness a slow, exquisite erosion, and my only sin was wanting to be the stone that caught the dust. Do not look for me in the sun, Ren. I am the shadow that makes the light bearable. The curated absence." Ren didn't burn the note. He didn't hide it in a drawer. Instead, he folded it into a small, sharp-edged square and kept it in his breast pocket directly over his heart. It was a clandestine weight, a secret anchor. He began to notice the expensive nature of Liam's absence. The world felt thin. When Sarah touched him, he felt the lack of Liam's bruising, proprietary grip. When she spoke of their future, he heard only the echo of the sanctuary Liam had tried to build in the dark. Liam had achieved the ultimate act of possessiveness. He had ruined the world for Ren by showing him a version of himself that no one else was capable of seeing. The infinite shadow. The epilogue of their bond wasn't a reunion, but a permanent haunting. Ren would stand at the window of the high-rise, watching the city pulse with a cold, mechanical heart, and he would feel the phantom pressure of a hand at the nape of his neck. He realized then that Liam hadn't actually left. He had simply transitioned from a person into an atmosphere. Every breath Rin took was filtered through the memory of that suffocating, divine devotion. He was still the gilded bird, and the cage was still there. Only now, the bars were made of ink and silence, and the door was locked from the inside. Liam was gone, but Rin was finally, irrevocably his.